The United States, as one of the most powerful and influential nations in the world, has frequently found itself involved in conflicts abroad. However, there are compelling reasons why the U.S. should not fund foreign wars. These arguments are based on national priorities, the risks of intervention, and the negative consequences of prolonged engagement in overseas conflicts. Here are the top 9 reasons the United States should stop funding foreign wars. 1. Diverting resources from domestic priorities. Funding foreign wars diverts billions of dollars away from pressing domestic needs. The United States faces significant challenges at home, including crumbling infrastructure, rising healthcare costs, education inequalities, and poverty. Rather than channeling vast sums of money into conflicts overseas, these resources could be better invested in improving the lives of American citizens. The opportunity cost of military spending abroad is the neglect of essential services and economic growth domestically. 2. Escalation and prolonging conflict. U.S. involvement in foreign wars can unintentionally escalate conflicts and prolong violence. History has shown that U.S. military funding or intervention can deepen existing tensions or empower factions that fuel instability, as seen in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. By supporting one side of a conflict, the U.S. risks perpetuating cycles of violence, making it harder to achieve peace and stability. Additionally, such involvement often draws the U.S. into protracted engagements that drain resources and damage global standing. 3. Lack of clear objectives and endgame. Often, U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts lacks a clear objective or endgame, leading to mission creep. Without clearly defined goals, military engagements become drawn out, and the U.S. risks being trapped in conflicts for years or even decades. This was evident in both Vietnam and Afghanistan, where initial involvement morphed into long, costly, and ultimately unsuccessful wars. Without a well-defined strategy, the U.S. should not commit to funding foreign conflicts that could become endless quagmires. 4th, damage to international reputation and moral standing. The U.S. has long been a global advocate for democracy, human rights, and diplomacy. Funding foreign wars can undermine these values and damage its moral standing. When the U.S. is seen as fueling violence, supporting questionable regimes, or engaging in unnecessary conflicts, it loses credibility on the global stage. This erosion of trust makes it harder to lead international diplomatic efforts and diminishes its ability to be seen as a champion of peace and stability. 5. Domestic political and social divisiveness. Funding foreign wars is often unpopular among the American public, leading to increased political and social division at home. Wars fought far from U.S. borders, particularly those with unclear connections to national security, can foster resentment and skepticism about government priorities. The Vietnam War, Iraq War, and conflicts in Afghanistan triggered widespread protests and political unrest, dividing the nation. This division weakens the country's unity and can lead to further instability. 6. Humanitarian and ethical concerns. Wars almost always result in humanitarian crises, and by funding foreign conflicts, the U.S. may inadvertently contribute to the suffering of innocent civilians. Civilian casualties, displacement, and destruction of infrastructure are often the tragic outcomes of war. Supporting foreign wars, especially when the results are long-term instability and humanitarian disasters, conflicts with the U.S.'s ethical responsibility to promote peace and protect human rights. 7. Focus on diplomacy and global cooperation. Rather than funding foreign wars, the U.S. should invest in diplomacy, conflict resolution, and global cooperation. Working through international institutions like the United Nations, the U.S. can promote peace without resorting to military intervention. Diplomatic efforts and partnerships to address conflicts at their root causes, such as poverty, ethnic tension, or political instability, are far more sustainable and align with U.S. values of global leadership through peaceful means. 8. Unintended consequences and blowback. U.S. involvement in foreign wars often leads to unintended consequences, including blowback, where previous military actions come back to harm U.S. interests. Examples include U.S. support for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s, which contributed to the rise of al-Qaeda, and the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which destabilized the region and helped give rise to ISIS. Supporting foreign wars can have long-term, unforeseen consequences that undermine U.S. security rather than enhance it. 9. National security doesn't always require military involvement. U.S. national security is not necessarily best served by military involvement in foreign conflicts. Many threats, such as terrorism, cyber attacks, and economic instability, are better addressed through intelligence sharing, cybersecurity investments, and international partnerships than through direct military engagement. Overemphasizing military solutions at the expense of diplomatic and economic tools limits the US's ability to address modern global challenges. The United States should not fund foreign wars due to the immense financial, political, and ethical costs. Doing so undermines domestic priorities, risks prolonging conflicts, and damages the country's international reputation. By focusing on diplomacy, conflict resolution, and addressing root causes of instability, the U.S. can better serve both its national interests and the cause of global peace. As history has shown, military involvement abroad often leads to unintended consequences, draining resources and diverting attention from more effective solutions to global and domestic challenges. If you found this video to be enlightening or informative, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.